Welcome back to the 4th episode in my Road to the Super Bowl series. I put this one up for a vote, listed a bunch of random teams that I believed in this year, then I switched it to the AFC South. I considered the Jaguars after this awesome comment that just made so much sense until I got to the end and saw Go Patriots. When it came down to it, I'm trying to be right on one of these with the teams that I'm featuring because I don't have time to make one for every team, so I gotta run with the teams that I think are legit. The fact that I can make an argument for any 4 of the teams in the AFC South as the next team in this Road to Super Bowl series though does tell you something about the gauntlet that the Colts will have to get through just to secure a division title. But I've said this in quite a few of my videos so far, I do believe that a tough division and a tough schedule better prepares you for the road ahead to make a Super Bowl run. Now, these are the major questions that I have for the Colts headed into 2019. Andrew Luck's health, the wide receivers, are they going to be boom or bust this year? And how much gas is left in Justin Houston's tank? We're going to get to all that in this video, but for now, cue the intro.
We're gonna have some fun today, Pawnee!
Before we get started, I hate to do it, but I've got to do it. Please hit that like button. It really helps me grow this channel, allows the YouTube algorithm to kick in that people just like you are going to like this video, and therefore YouTube will show it to more people just like you. So if you're a Colts fan or if you're an NFL fan and you appreciate original NFL content, please hit that like button. The goal for these has always been 1,000 likes, and then I start working on my next one. Hit the subscribe button, and let's get into the 2018 recap of the Indianapolis Colts. By now, everyone knows they did start 1-5, and then they made the playoffs. They defied all odds because 1-5 is truly a death sentence in the NFL. You should be left for dead at that point, just roadkill. But the Colts managed to reel off 9-1 record to finish the season, and even took down the division champs on the road in the playoffs. They allowed the fewest points in the league in their final 10 games. Shutting out the Cowboys definitely helped that, and then they ended up finishing 10th in scoring defense. I'm going to go ahead and blame that slow start on Andrew Luck's rust after taking a year off from football and losing some pretty good teams. Week 1, the Bengals, they were at full strength at that point. That was probably one of their best performances of the year. It was actually a really entertaining game also. But losing to the Eagles, Texans, and Patriots, there's no shame in that. Those are pretty good teams. The Jets, that's one they probably wish they could have had back, but the defense really stepped it up after that point. And once the Colts turned it on, man, they turned it on and they were all business. They knew what they needed to do to make the playoffs. Usually that's just coach speak when you're 1-5, but 9-1 down the stretch is pretty insane, and I'm excited about what this team is capable of with a healthy, rust-free Andrew Luck. Speaking of Andrew Luck, we're going to break down this 2019 roster position group by position group, starting with the quarterbacks. This roster went from one of the weakest rosters in the league a few years ago to one of the deepest at a lot of really key positions. Ryan Grigson to Chris Ballard is one of the least talked about glow-ups out there right now outside of Indianapolis. It's really amazing what Ballard has done in such little time and some of the shrewd moves that he's made to improve this roster. Starting at the quarterbacks, we've got Andrew Luck, Jacoby Brissett, Chad Kelly as a potential backup too. And there's some irony in Andrew Luck's career thus far. The Colts were fortunate, or you could say lucky, to have a #1 draft pick season sandwiched in between 2 franchise quarterbacks. But they've had some severe misfortune, or you could say bad luck, with injuries. Sorry guys, I'm a new dad, so I've been working on my puns. But Luck's 2018 season was really overshadowed by MVP Patrick Mahomes, and he had a quiet 4,593 passing yards and 39 touchdowns. And they do say that married quarterbacks perform better in the NFL, and during that season off, Luck rehabbed his shoulder and his marriage, and now he seems like he's ready to peak in the NFL as a married, confident, settled guy. One day we'll look back at all the great AFC quarterbacks that didn't even get a chance to play in the Super Bowl because of Tom Brady, and Andrew Luck's probably going to be the best of all of them. Now, as far as the backup quarterback situation goes, it's probably the best situation in the NFL. Jacoby Brissett was kind of a steal in the trade with the Patriots, and he's also a pretty solid follow on Twitter. If you haven't seen some of his tweets, they're pretty interesting. I actually thought about doing a YouTube video where I actually answered Jacoby Brissett's Twitter questions. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see that. Chad Kelly is a funny prospect to have on this team. He doesn't really seem to fit the old Indianapolis mold that much, but once again, Chris Ballard, you might as well leave no stone unturned. If he makes the roster, I'll be surprised because there's so much depth on this roster. The Colts aren't going to want to waste a roster spot on a guy when they've got the best 1-2 quarterback situation in the league. Moving on to running backs, we've got Marlon Mack, Nyheim Hines, recently claimed running back Deontay Foreman, and Jordan Wilkins. Now this is probably the weakest spot on offense, and not because there's a shortage of of prospects, but more because of the health concerns that linger with all of the guys in this depth chart. Marlon Mack in his third season could be looking at his first 1,000-yard season, unless Nyheim Hines develops and steals some touches from him. Hines should be the third down back, but Mack is probably the most complete running back on the roster. D'Onta Foreman was just claimed off of waivers, and I love the move to snatch up the rival Texans running back. Foreman was reportedly cut because he wasn't taking this opportunity seriously, whatever that means. But if you ask me, he was probably only cut because Bill O'Brien was trying to make a statement. Coaches like to do this a lot early in the season to get the attention of their roster. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense to cut a running back before getting some preseason games out of him at least. He's coming off of a ruptured Achilles, and that's usually a career killer for running backs. So maybe Bill O'Brien was actually just trying to make an example out of a guy that really didn't just have that burst anymore. Either way, it is a low risk, high reward move that was well worth the waiver claim. And then finally, Jordan Wilkins. He's kind of an under the radar guy. Mostly only fantasy guys know him, but he could really step up barring injuries. But the addition of Foreman does put his roster spot in question, and could also be just one of those moves that the Colts are making just to motivate the running back room a little bit more. At wide receiver, we've got T.Y. Hilton, Devin Funchess, Parris Campbell, and then some other guys. This is really a boom or bust group. Andrew Luck to T.Y. Hilton is one of the best deep threat connections in the NFL, and I expect it to continue on that way. Devin Funchess was such a perfect pickup for this offense. He is the big wide receiver that's been lacking from this offense for a while, and even though the contract was a little bit pricey versus his past production, he could actually be this year's Eric Ebron. Now, Parris Campbell, he has the highest ceiling of any of the Ohio State wide receivers in the draft since, I think, Michael Thomas. Now, he is not Michael Thomas type of wide receiver, but Parris Campbell had a draft situation that was similar to Thomas's, except for Parris Campbell actually got to play with an NFL quarterback. No offense to JT Barrett, and that's why his production with Dwayne Haskins increased so much. His receptions and yards doubled, and his touchdowns quadrupled when Haskins took over. Now, the fourth spot on this depth chart is up for grabs. Chester Rodgers was brought back on a one-year deal, so his roster spot isn't even guaranteed. Dontrell Inman had some nice chemistry with Luck. I like him, big UVA guy here. Deion Kane returned from an ACL injury that cost him his entire rookie year, and he was an interesting prospect also. But this depth at wide receiver is really only a positive for the competition that it breeds, especially at the bottom of the depth chart. Luck's one of those quarterbacks that maximizes the talent from his receivers, and he hasn't had a group with this much potential in a long time, if ever. 2014 is probably the closest talent-wise when he had a young T.Y., an old Reggie Wayne, Kobe Fleener, and Dwayne Allen at tight end, and then he even squeezed out some production from Dante Moncrief and Hakeem Nicks. Not to bring up a sore subject, but that season concluded with a 45-7 loss to the Patriots in the AFC Championship game that year. At tight end, we've got Eric Ebron, Jack Doyle, and Mo Alley Cox. Now, Eric Ebron was the free agent steal of the decade. It's really an indictment on Matthew Stafford, I think, but free agents are not traditionally that impactful, but Eric Ebron's top 10 draft talent really shined through in a season in which he had a career-high 13 touchdowns. Andrew Luck loves his tight ends.
I love tight ends. I love tight ends. They're big.
And Jack Doyle would probably be the number one tight end on half the rosters around the league. But with that love for tight ends, Chris Ballard added Ebron to the mix, and now the Colts are stacked at the position. Mo Alley Cox is the latest guy trying to be the next Antonio Gates, but he just adds to the tight end depth and makes up for the athleticism that a guy like Jack Doyle might lack. The ex-VCU basketball player has the potential to ascend to the future tight end one on this position, but what I like most about his potential is that he's going to push Ebron once again to be as effective as he was in 2018. Ebron only signed a 2-year deal, so he could see himself really cashing in after this season, especially if he helps lead the Colts to a Super Bowl. He may even play himself out of the budget for the Colts, who have just too much depth at the position to re-sign Ebron to a Jimmy Graham type of deal worth upwards of $13 million. But that would be a good, maybe even great problem to have, and I'm sure that it would be a likely welcomed one for Chris Ballard in the 2020 offseason. At offensive line, we've got a much improved group, one of the fastest turnarounds that you can imagine. Anthony Costanzo, Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, Mark Lewinsky, and Braden Smith. Costanzo has been there through thick and thin and finally has a legit unit to run with. Starting with his neighbor at left guard, last year's rookie Pro Bowler Quentin Nelson. Nelson is such an enforcer, and it's hard not to credit him with a large part of their quick turnaround, but you've also got to recognize that it was in part from a scheme change that really featured a lot of quicker reads and fewer deep dropbacks by Luck. Ryan Kelly is a solid but not spectacular center, but he's got that championship pedigree from leading that Alabama offensive line, and I still don't think that he's fully peaked. Mark Lewinsky, he's probably the weakest link here, but every offensive line has one just in comparison. And who in their right mind even tries to move a college right guard to right tackle in the NFL, and let alone actually end up having success? 99 times out of 100 it goes the other way around. But Braden Smith was drafted as a guard and then really went and solidified the right tackle position for the Colts as a rookie. As a whole, this is a solid group, and they could see even more improvement in their second season as a cohesive unit. And a lot of offensive line guys would agree that continuity is actually more important in the trenches than talent. But this year, the Colts have both. All right, now let's shift over to the defense where things are a little bit more complicated and we have to project a little bit more than we do with the offense. This defensive line is small and fast, just like the Tony Dungy coach teams. And typically I like to try and break down the defensive line by edge rushers and interior defensive linemen, but there was so much updated information from my initial evaluation on this team based on memory compared to the post-research edition that I'm just going to have to go through everybody in a sort of defensive line category here. They've really gone all in on this speedy defensive line, and it seems like they're really going to rely on the great linebacker play and focus on penetrating defensive tackles, whom I thought were still playing on the edge. But it's going to put a lot of pressure on the linebackers to make sure that they're stopping the run against this undersized unit so they don't get bullied. Justin Houston is the player that people are most likely to be like, oh yeah, I forgot the Colts got him. But the addition of the former All-Pro pass rusher is the reason for some of the big shifts in personnel here. Now, it's been a long time since his 22 sacks in 2014, but I think he still should have some gas left in the tank. In 2018, he did have 9 sacks in 12 games, and he could be just completely rejuvenated with a fresh start on another AFC contender. Getting cut will do wonders for your motivation and ego to prove yourself once again. And Justin Houston on this fast indie turf could be something special, or it could be too much pressure on the random knee, elbow, or hamstring injuries that have plagued him in the past. But like I said, getting cut's going to motivate him, and he's probably going to be in some of the best shape of his life going into 2019. Jabal Shear's been a nice free agent pickup, and they've definitely got their money's worth out of him, but the old vet needs to hold off some of these young guys. Now, this defensive scheme doesn't rely on a huge impact from the defensive tackles, but that didn't stop Danico Autry and Margus Hunt last year. Autry had a huge 2018 with 9 sacks, and Margus Hunt, man, I don't know if you guys remember, this guy was a Madden rookie legend. He had some insane physical attributes that were comparable to JJ Watt, and I'm really glad that he finally found a home moving inside for the Colts. Taekwon Lewis is one of the guys drafted as an edge rusher, but he's been moved inside, is now listed as the nose tackle on the Colts' first depth chart of the season. I don't know how long that holds up, but it's interesting to read into for now. Now, there are still so many unknown prospects on this roster, but Chris Ballard didn't just sit there and hope that his guys get better and stay healthy. He went out and acquired even more talent, both proven and ones with high potential. Second rounder Ben Banigou is listed as linebacker for them, but he was definitely an edge rusher at TCU. He is a raw athlete, cut from the same cloth as a guy like Robert Mathis.
What's up, girl? Keep walking, 98.
You don't want to talk to that guy? He plays in the NFL.
He's a linebacker. Skill positions only for Don Amigo.
But he could just end up being a hybrid player with the logjam that they have at defensive end. Moving on to those linebackers that are going to be oh so important for this defense. Darius Leonard, Anthony Walker, Bobby Okereke, EJ Speed. These guys, they're going to make up a freakish unit, especially with Bobby Okereke. Darius, the Maniac Leonard, is your reigning defensive rookie of the year. The Maniac is hilarious to me. This is like one of those nicknames that you get from the 2K like default list to choose from. Now, as your favorite Cowboys fan on the internet, this Darius Leonard, Leighton Vander Esch debate has to be addressed. It's a little bit one-sided, guys. I'll be honest. Last year, I felt like Colts fans were constantly screaming at Cowboys fans and anybody that would listen about how good Darius Leonard was and why he was actually a better player than Leighton Vander Esch. But us as Cowboys fans, we were just happy with the guy that a lot of the fan base didn't even anticipate panning out the way that he did. So really, I think that we should all just move past this and accept the fact that we are looking at the next generation of great linebackers in the NFL. This could be the next Ray Lewis and Brian Urlacher, or for you younger cats, Bobby Wagner and Luke Kuechly. Anthony Walker is another solid player that is probably going to see fewer snaps with the additions of Bobby Okereke. EJ Speed is a awesome name for a guy that brings exactly what he's named after, is speed. This is a fast unit. Anthony Walker's probably the slowest of the group, but he's probably one of the more sure tacklers also. So there's definitely a place for all of these guys to play on this defense. Moving on to the defensive backs, this unit is flooded with untapped potential, but there are health concerns everywhere you look. Now, cornerback's not as weak of a spot on this defense if this pass rush is as good as I anticipate. They spent a second round pick after shrewdly trading back for Rock Ya-Sin, who a lot of people had in the first round, so you got a great talent there. And Kenny Moore had a breakout season in 2018 and was rewarded as the highest paid slot cornerback in the league. Now, Pierre Desir also had a really solid season, was a good free agent pickup for them, but I'd really like to see Quincy Wilson break out of this funk, man. I don't know why he hasn't played better. I know that he's been plagued by injuries here and there also. But then moving on to safety, Malik Hooker, another guy guy. Injuries have been devastating for him, but he's still got top safety in the league potential. Hopefully he's spent these first few seasons getting his body right, because he and Clayton Geathers could make up a really solid dynamic at the safety position, and they complement each other so well, being complete opposites in what they're good at, with Clayton Geathers being this massive in the box safety, while Malik Hooker could be your center fielder, Ed Reed type. Now, I don't usually address the specialists, the kickers and punters, but I felt like Adam Vinatieri deserved a shout out because he is the oldest guy in the league, still killing it, future first ballot Hall of Famer as a kicker. That's saying something. I hope that he has a storybook ending to his career this year. And then as far as the coaching staff goes, I was impressed with Nick Sirianni as the offensive coordinator. Frank Reich, he believes in strong trenches, and that's mostly what this team is built upon. I think he was such a solid pickup, and I was really impressed with him after being kind of underwhelmed initially with the fact that the Colts had to settle for their second choice at head coach. But man, it turned out to be such a blessing to avoid Josh McDaniels as head coach of your football team. Now, the guy I really want to headline here is Matt Eberflus. His zone blitzes help with the Colts' lack of pass rush and will probably earn him a head coaching job in 2020. I was a big fan of Matt Eberflus's as the Cowboys linebacker coach. I paid close attention to that team, and he was one guy that hung around for quite a while through multiple different defensive coordinators, and it's because he knows what he's doing, man. He's a smart guy. I really do credit him, or blame him, I guess you could say, for that thrashing the Colts gave the Cowboys at the end of the season last year. But he's going to be one of the main reasons, and it's kind of the X factor on this team altogether, because this defense needs to continue to develop a little bit more to reach that next level of dominance, especially against some of these AFC offensive teams. Now let's take a look at the 2019 schedule, because this schedule is easily the toughest of the 4 teams I've done thus far in this road to the Super Bowl series. And while I've stated that a tough schedule can prepare you for a playoff run, it can also bury you early on.
What are you doing? I'm burying you. I'm alive, man. I'm alive.
And yes, I know the Colts were 1-5 last year, but to think that they could go 1-5 again and do that in back-to-back seasons is just naive. They've got to get off to a fast start in 2019. The back-to-back road games to start the season against decent AFC teams are going to be pretty important, and could be the reason the Colts are being so cautious with Andrew Luck's calf. They need him as healthy as possible, and he doesn't need preseason reps, let's be honest. Keep him healthy and let Jacoby Brissett get as many preseason reps as possible, just in case. But then they've got the Falcons, who are going to be ready to fly in Lucas Oil Stadium. That team loves playing in a dome. And the Raiders have been a meme for a while, but we'll know if they're to be taken seriously yet or not by week 4, so at least they won't catch the Colts by surprise. But it still has the makings of a trap game, with a trip to Arrowhead following the game against the Raiders to play the Chiefs. Week 6 is kinda early for a bye week, especially with such an injury-prone roster. In fact, I looked back and found out that only 2 teams in the last decade have won the Super Bowl with a bye week before midseason. That was the 2015 Broncos and the 2011 Giants. They both had week 7 byes. But the 2006 Colts won the Super Bowl, and they also had a week 6 bye. So yeah, take it for what it's worth. The coaching staff better use that bye week wisely though, because they've got 3 tough AFC opponents after that before, I guess you could call it, another bye week versus the Dolphins. And then they follow that up with 3 consecutive AFC South matchups with a Thursday night football game on the road sandwiched in there. And then on top of that, they've got 3 consecutive NFC South matchups with a Monday night football game against Drew Brees and company in the Superdome. I told you, this schedule is absolutely brutal. The regular season concludes with a road trip to Jacksonville. Whether the Jacksonville Jaguars are playing for anything at this point or not, this still won't be an easy way to end the season. At least the weather there will be nice. Speaking of the AFC South, let's break down this division opponent by opponent. While I mentioned that this division has 4 teams that I considered for this episode, they're not all among the elite in the league. In fact, other than the Colts, these AFC South teams would potentially be bottom feeders in almost every other NFC division, because the AFC is just kind of weak right now. But they are all built to lean on their defense and manage to beat up on each other every single year. First up, let's talk about the Titans. The Titans could be good if they run this offense through Derrick Henry. I still don't know how Matt LaFleur earned a head coaching job with his mishandling of the Titans running game last year for 3/4 of the 2018 season. And then the Titans, they went and they added Ryan Tannehill. So between him and Mariota, the Titans might get a full 16 games out of the 2 of them. The defense is reloading their pass rush with a 37-year-old edge rusher. 37. Cameron Wake has been a freak, but his 6 sack season in 2018 is a clear sign of his diminishing skills, and this team is just still haunted by the ghost of Jeff Fisher. So their ceiling feels like 9-7 and the floor is 7-9. It's about what they're going to accomplish this year probably. The Jacksonville Jaguars had that one good season. They got jobbed by the refs, and even as a Colts fan, it's okay to admit that. And then they struggled to regain that magic last year. The good news is that Leonard Fournette still has hamstrings made out of old rubber bands, and his quads get deep tissue bruises worse than an old avocado. The bad news is the team finally moved on from Blake Bortles, and now Nick Big Foles is the quarterback, and he's with the same offensive mind that set him up to be a Philadelphia hero. This team could be a problem, but we'll wait and see. Now, the Houston Texans. I used to have a lot of respect for Bill O'Brien. I felt like that Hard Knocks episode really shed a lot of light on his coaching style and a side of him that you don't typically get to see. It's funny how watching Hard Knocks can make you believe things that just probably aren't true. And it's a shame because it seemed like he and Deshaun Watson were about to do something special, and for the sake of the NFL, it would have been fun. But Frank Reich and the Colts just seem to already have his number. While this Texans team is uber talented, they also feel like they have a ceiling, and it was hit last year. If Deshaun Watson can bounce back from that injury, now that he's a year removed from the torn ACL, and regain some of that rookie production, this could be another team that is a little bit scary in the AFC South. So the Colts not only had the toughest schedule of the 4 teams I've done thus far, but they've also got by far the toughest division. Now let's take a look at how the Colts match up with some conference contenders. First up, let's talk about the Browns. While the Browns were the first team I started this Road to the Super Bowl series with, and I'm still really proud of that video, and I appreciate all the support it's received. Go watch that after this if you haven't. Baker Mayfield and company are really still a year away. Don't get me wrong, I still think that they're going to be good, like really good, like top 3, maybe top 5 offense good. But they also feel like they'll be playing a little off script and recklessly every single week, meaning they could be one of the top 2 seeds in the AFC, dominating defenses on a weekly basis, but then lose their first playoff game from bye week rust and overconfidence that leads to complacency and poor game day execution. How many times in the past have we seen that happen to a top seed in the playoffs? In fact, the Colts would be a perfect team to host a wild card team, and then Andrew Luck's veteran playoff leadership takes them into Cleveland to upset the Browns. And then we have the Kansas City Chiefs. In the Justin Houston revenge game, the Colts will have to unleash this man against his old team and their subpar offensive tackles. Houston could have a mere 6 to 8 sacks in the regular season while participating in a healthy defensive line rotation, and then be set loose on the elite offenses in the playoffs. If anybody knows how to take advantage of the Chiefs' blocking schemes, it's the man that's been practicing against it for the better half of the previous decade. I really feel like this is where Houston's true value will show up, and the Kansas City Wonder Kid will have to wait yet another offensive record-breaking season for his chance at the Super Bowl, just as Andrew Luck had to wait his turn.
Oh, Andrew Luck cold-blooded, man. Cold-blooded.
And finally, the Patriots. Tom Brady has been a thorn in Andrew Luck's Super Bowl chances thus far. This time around, it's going to take Andrew Luck just being fed up with the Brady and Belichick bullying. He's going to need to put the team on his back and carry the Colts to a victory. This isn't the most talented team that Brady and company have had, especially not compared to the one that gave the Colts that 45-7 thrashing in 2014, but this is the most talented Colts team since Peyton Manning was dueling the guy that's going to end up being known as the greatest quarterback of all time.
That number 12 is so mysterious, man. Stop playing with that man.
And now, let's finally get to how the Indianapolis Colts win the Super Bowl. It all starts with Andrew Luck's health, allowing him to have an MVP caliber season. Fuck it, I'm calling it now. Andrew Luck's winning MVP this year. With a guy like Andrew Luck, you really just need the running game to just be effective, not dominant, and that's perfect for today's NFL. The chemistry with these new wide receivers needs to click from day one, with Devin Funchess really showing up big for the Colts and functioning almost as a receiving tight end. Remember, he was a wide receiver tight end combo coming out of Michigan, which is one of the reasons I think that he's just the perfect fit for Andrew Luck. And then sticking with the offense, Eric Ebron needs to continue to dominate, and I'd love to see his role increased so that the Colts can continue to get their money's worth out of him. Moving on to the defensive side, the pass rush has got to be elevated with Justin Houston, and these young guys have got to step their game up. I want to see the linebackers continue to develop, no sophomore slumps for Leonard, and the secondary is going to be the beneficiary of the upgraded front seven, and Malik Hooker has got to stay healthy. Hooker is the X factor in this defense. He'll be needed to slow down Mahomes and Brady in the playoffs. Now, obviously, missing out on having to play either the Chiefs or the Patriots in the playoffs would be nice, but like I said, the AFC is not very deep, so if they want things done right, then they might just have to do it themselves. This 2019 Colts team has a lot of injury-prone labels on it, but they also have the depth now to withstand some of these minor injuries that don't cost the major guys on their team the remainder of their season. If they can preserve the major impact guys like Andrew Luck, T.Y. Hilton, Justin Houston, and Malik Hooker, this team has the Pro Bowl production at almost every level that is required from a Super Bowl roster. There's potential for a Super Bowl rematch here with the Bears or the Saints. But man, how sweet would it be to avenge the Peyton Manning loss to Drew Brees and Sean Payton with Andrew Luck's first championship. And you know a guy like Frank Reich is going to have his own Philly special up his sleeve, maybe an onside kick right from the get-go, set the tone, and Matt Eberflus brings the pressure on Drew Brees, gets him shook, and after a walk-off Adam Vinatieri game-winning field goal, the Indianapolis Colts will host the Lombardi Trophy once again. Thanks for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing, guys. If you're still watching this far into the video, what are you waiting for? Please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. It helps me grow, and the more I grow, the more time I can convince my wife to give me to make more NFL content like this. I got twin babies and a 3-year-old, so free time around this house is hard to come by. But I got a lot of cool stuff planned for this NFL season, and I hope you'll join me for the ride. That's going to do it for me. Good luck to everybody's football team in this preseason. I hope everybody stays as healthy as possible, and I will see you all in the next video.